Hello and welcome back to my channel, and thanks for joining me in the first episode of my Dragon Warriors solo campaign. Yes, here we have a classic example of British old school fantasy role-playing, 1980s style. I was hunting through my garage, this infamous garage that I mention on occasions on the channel, and I discovered my old Dragon Warriors RPG game books, and this is the examples before you. Book 1, Book 2 and Book 3, all snugly held inside this paperback folder, a bit too snugly. The middle one was in the best condition. The first one is probably the most thumbed. I have got some pencil marks in it where I have done things. And also the Elven Crystals, which is the last one, is the Adventures. And I can see that I've been doing bits and bobs on that too. I played these to death back in when they came out, 1985. I was really very impressed by them. And even, as a seasoned veteran role player by that stage, having cut my teeth on D&D, AD&D, RuneQuest, Chivalry and Sorcery, Space Opera, etc., etc. I was mightily impressed by these, and I had a lot of fun playing them solo. And I have been reflecting on these, and I thought it might be a nice idea to play the included adventures on the channel and sample the game from a nostalgia point of view. And it could be quite an interesting example of old school history. I would probably add to that, it's also a very compact and I think, in my opinion, a well-designed system. And as I've said, it gave me a great deal of pleasure and entertainment back in the day when it came out. And I think it really packs a punch for a game. And some background to this particular role-playing game. What I remembered was that the author, Dave Morris, I think it is. Yeah, Dave Morris. He was the co-creator of Dragon Warriors role-playing game, which he developed with another chap called Oliver Johnson back in 1985. And they were quite big names if you are familiar with the White Dwarf, which is the British equivalent to the Dragon magazine. And it became, I suppose, a more kind of vehicle for Warhammer later on. But at the start, it was non-proprietary, and it covered all role-playing games. And they did a lot of articles for that particular publication. So there are names that are probably more familiar to the UK audience than American. As of April 2011, Serpent King Games became the license holder of Dragon Warriors. And they actually republished these books, of which there are actually 6. I've only got 3. They republished them in an updated version in a glossy hardback format. And I've looked at, since seeing all these things and reflecting on it and doing my research on the game again, I've seen it's really kind of grown arms and legs, and the glossy version is very appealing as a purchase. But I thought, well, I'll go back to my roots and I will just use my game books. And to my surprise, as I said, with all this research that I was doing, I discovered a considerable support network dedicated to this game. So yeah, it really took me by, I was really quite taken back by the fact that it had a bit of a revival. I don't know how popular it's been across, globally, on whether how many people have played the game since its revival, but certainly I can attest to the fact that back in the 80s, this was quite important, because you will have noticed they are in this kind of book format, and the game book was a very important feature of the market at the time, for people that weren't really into role-playing maybe, and they would have an introduction through the solo adventures. So they kind of with all the numbered keys that you would use, like Lone Wolf and that type of stuff. Those type of adventures. Ian Livingstone was a big author for them. These had a similar kind of vibe to them, although they did comprise an actual living and breathing role-playing game, which I'm going to probably demonstrate through my episodes. A summary of the Dragon Warriors system. So I pulled together some little brief notes of the system. The game is a fantasy role-playing game known for its relatively simple rules, dark medieval setting, and a unique modular format of smaller paperback books, which I am demonstrating here. The setting is set in a dark medieval world called Legend, which is influenced by British folklore and myth. So it's got a real kind of British feel to it. I would say it's quite Arthurian. It's quite, it's kind of local legends. It's got that kind of English, British, kind of hybrid of Celtic, feudal, medieval, legend, all that kind of stuff all rolled together, with a bit smatterings of the old Roman Empire, Britannica, that type of thing. The format is unlike most RPGs. It was initially released as a series of 6 separate, inexpensive paperback books that players would collect to form a complete game. And I personally collected the first 3, these ones here that I have before you. Gameplay. The system is known for its quick and deadly combat, with a focus on a mythic fantasy atmosphere. And I can attest to that. It really is quite a simple system. As an equivalent, I'm playing this game just now, this 4 Against Darkness, which I am having an absolute ball playing, and I really think it is a really good system. This is similar, the kind of mechanics, but it's a more kind of rounded role-playing game. So it has other things like with character generation, and the attack and defense is a bit more sophisticated, and it's on a more individual level. But there are similarities and overlaps, and the elegant mechanics that are in 4 Against Darkness are replicated in Dragon Warriors, where you have a very streamlined system that is quick to go through. Combats are quite quick and bloody, or they can be. Sometimes there is a bit, because there are fixed weapon damage, sometimes it takes a while to wear opponents down, but it's medieval combat was sometimes like that. It was a bit of an attritional affair, so that could reflect some of that. What about my solo campaign? And you're probably saying, oh no, Brian, what are you doing? And not another one. And I'm thinking, well, I'm just going to add this in as one of the other campaigns that I want to basically highlight and show off on the channel. And I think if I demonstrate how I'm going to couch this and approach it, you might forgive my sins and just allow me to indulge myself. I'm only going to be using the 3 game books. I'm going to be playing through the scenarios in turn with a group of randomly generated characters. Now, what I mean by that sentence is that within each of these, there is 1 scenario in Dragon Warriors Book 1. There is 2 scenarios, I think, in The Way of Wizardry. And there is almost like this is entirely created based on scenarios. And I'm going to be running through, let's look at some of the artwork. It's fantastic, isn't it? Very evocative. I'm going to be running through these as basically just solo adventures. And they're not really solo adventures, but I'm going to modify them as if I was approaching them as with a little band of characters. And I'm going to randomly generate the characters, and there are some proto rules in here that I can use. For example, there are some encounters here that I can use for generating my adventurers. If I can just get to the bit that's got it. Yep, at the front. This is where I'm feeling. Yes, here we go. Adventurers. And there are these classes, and human, elf, and dwarf, and I can do some random rolls on that. And I'll demonstrate that in the next episode. I'm going to employ a simple yes-no oracle if that's required. That's all I'm going to do as a solo mechanic. The adventurers will be played as a party, but I thought as a bit of a twist to this and a bit of a change, I will employ one special player character, almost like a first amongst equals, as our own favoured individual, and represent through him or her what I call my morality mechanic. That is to be quite a theme of the setting. So morality is a strong aspect of the Dragon Warriors game world and this world of legend. And I have a scale that I have created where I can measure the morality. It's equivalent to, almost like a kind of a surrogate for alignment. So you are going from 1, which is very, quite, you really have no morals. You're really quite an awful human being, up to 6, where you're quite saintly and you're almost divine. And the characters have to appear somewhere on that scale. And the idea is that you move up the moral scale and you become better and more saintly as you evolve. And there are pitfalls in that travel, and we're going to use our favorite character to show that. So I have these themes of what is it? I think I call it virtue and shadow as the two counterparts that can either lift you up with a virtuous act, say you rescue someone, or you give money to the poor, or that type of thing, or a shadow, which is you maybe you murder someone, or you set a village on fire, or you do something absolutely awful, like a lawful evil person would do, that type of thing. And they kind of almost like the scales of fate. They kind of balance up, and that modifies whether you go up and down this morality scale. And I'm already giving away too much information on that, because I'm going to be explaining all that in the next episode. So let's move on to the fantasy setting. I'm going to be using the setting provided, but with my own interpretation of the dark Arthurian mythic style, which is embodied in these books. And when we go through the scenarios, you will see that they really are very atmospheric, and there's a lot of nice little twists in it. And I don't think I'm going to have to do very much to kind of amp that up. So I'm really quite looking forward to doing that again and getting that kind of almost, it's really quite a horrific, a bit of horror. And, the nearest thing I've got just now in my games portfolio is my basic fantasy, the Grimghast Dominion, which is my gothic horror. This is similar, but it's more a kind of a fantasy Arthurian romp with a kind of more of a mystic side. Then really there's almost like you feel this oppressive and really quite constrained environment that you're in the Dominion of having this Inquisition, and it's really very horrific. And it's almost, these supernatural things are happening because of this corruption. It's not really on that kind of scale here. It's more of a mystery and mythic type. And real horrors will be more down to folklore. So things that are in the bogs, like the Grendel, that type of thing, they're lurking in the mists type thing. And it's more kind of a mythological, that's the type of atmosphere that we're trying to go for. And as a quick kind of, I don't know if this helps, but think of a variation on Excalibur 1981, John Berman. And if you ever remember that Excalibur film, it really was very camp, but it was, it embodied a lot of the behaviors and the characteristics, I think, of the knights and the heroes that we're going to be having in this campaign, merged with Ivanhoe's Norman England. So if you've ever read that book, which is amazing, that setting of Norman England, and good versus evil, and bad characters like some of the Normans, and the good characters, the Anglo-Saxons. Some Beowulf, with the kind of mists and the creatures in the bogs and that type of stuff, with a sprinkling of Conan the Barbarian for a bit of a sword and sorcery infusion. Not dominated by Conan, it's not really that kind of setting, but there'll still be an element of that. And this barbarian type that we have will represent our kind of Conan type, going on that arc from basically adventurer up to king and conqueror. That's just some of the arcs that we're trying to replicate in this game. So in a summary, tales of faded glory, haunted faith, and moral doubt. That's the kind of atmosphere that we're after. Melancholy heroism, where knights still hold to ideals, but the world around them is dying, corrupted, or asleep beneath the mist. Yes, that sounds very sad, but that is the state of affairs that we're going to be in. The old ways, the fairy, pagan, and druidic magic are fading, and the new Christian-like faith is rising. So it's very Arthurian, that post-Roman Britain, that kind of with the advent of Christianity, and maybe just the reduction and decline of the fairy influence in the world, and the old gods disappearing, but still being potent and potentially malevolent forces in the background. These haunted landscapes of moors, ruined chapels, standing stones, and misted forests. Yes, it's very evocative. That's really what we're trying to conjure up here. It's a bit ramp up this atmosphere, and I suppose to really kind of to emphasize this, it's going to be a distinctly British medieval fantasy. It captures a darker, colder, and older version of fantasy than the D&D style, which I suppose is a more, I would say a more American style, which is a bit more optimistic and kind of bright and sunny, and whereas this is going to be your classic British, really quite dark and grim. It's raining all the time, there's clouds and there's mist and it's all that type of stuff. So that's going to be an infusion in this game. The tone is going to be folkloric, grounded, tragic, and superstitious. Peasants will fear the woods, knights will question their purpose, and every ruin will whisper of forgotten kings. Yes, and this gives a very nice cultural texture, I would say. It's also, we've got simple but flavorful rules, and that is they are got a lot of heft in them, even though they're very simple. The rules, they have a lot of there is quite a lot of integrity to these rules, quite a lot of depth, despite their kind of brief, their brevity. So I think you'll be quite interested in seeing that in action. And it's almost, the mechanics are light. They're almost a rules light before the term existed. So that, if they had a term called rules light back in 1985, that's what these are. In comparison to some of the heavyweights that I was employing at the time, chivalry and sorcery and space opera aren't exactly a walk in the park. These are very, very light in comparison. The combat is straightforward, attack versus defense, making it easy for solo play or small group improvisation, or so I hope. The classes, I touched on them, they feel archetypal. We only have 4 classes. We have a knight, we have a barbarian, we have a sorcerer, a mystic. Each expresses the mythic roles, and I will go into a lot more detail on what these classes are in the next episode and during the course of this campaign. Advancement is modest, keeping the focus on story, risk, and character. Dragon Warriors thrives on mood. You can feel the chill of the forest, the dread of the crypt, the awe of a ruined chapel at dusk. So you're probably saying, Brian, have you mentioned that there's a lot of atmosphere in this? Well, yes, that is one of the major selling points of this. It's also, there's a modular campaign growth. So within each book, expanding the world logically. That was the idea, that you played the first one and it just had knights and barbarians. And then you got into the second book and you were introduced to sorcerers and mystics. And then you got all of that together and you played the third one with all the campaign. But at the time you could actually play some other adventures in these two, just to cut your teeth on what you're after. The morality scale I'm using fits naturally into this worldview. So yes, it's all about your kind of growth, your improvement, your movement towards light, or maybe it is going to be the other way, a downward spiral into the dark. Let us hope not. And there will be individuals in this world which are on the depravity level of 1. We're really going to have to watch out for them. They will be lurking there, trying to tempt us. Artwork is evocative and atmospheric, and I think you will probably agree that maybe you think, well, some of it's a bit amateurish, but you have these little things here which are quite good fun. We've got the little adventurers, the players sitting around and they suddenly become transformed into these alter egos, that type of stuff. There is some surprising. Some of the examples we've got is almost like in a comic book. There's Sir Balin and is demonstrating attacks and defense, and I'll go through that type of thing. You have a little comic that I can read out to you, and it's not just a kind of straightforward example. There's other things that are quite funny. It's got a lot of kind of British humour in it, I think. This guy jumping out of his skin when he sees this creature coming up behind him. It's that type of style. This is really quite horrible. It's almost like a ninja type individual coming up the side of the tower, and this, I don't know what he is, a vampire or something, or somebody that doesn't really want to see him. Here's a dragon. That's your classic monster. A lot of the monsters in this are quite folklorish. Very interesting. I actually don't really like that picture very much. That's supposed to be elves. I don't think my elves are going to be looking quite like that. That's not how I imagine them. But I think, well, with the dwarves and the elves, they're not just going to be your standard Tolkien-esque type individuals. They are going to be quite distinctive in this. And I'm not just going to have your Tolkien rebrand. Anything else? Yeah, we've got individual kind of monsters that we have. And some of them are quite horrific, some of these pictures. And we've got these lovely little maps, which I'm going to use. I'm going to photocopy this and we'll have this as our centerpiece. And the idea is I just try and make it as kind of old school as possible in the presentation, and we get that kind of feeling about it. And I just bring out the artwork when I can. So there's lots of little maps that I can use. There's a tomb. These are like the adventures, and I'll be able to throw pictures of the adventure and give you a kind of visualization of that as we go through. And again, there's a lot of stuff online that I could probably take prints out of, and whatever. And because it is an old game, I don't feel that I've got this kind of almost a restriction that I have on some of my other games of using stuff that I get off the internet on this. There's just some lovely pictures in it. Yeah, look, there's some skeletons. That's a real skeleton. That he's got his scimitar. I've had a bit of a run-in with skeletons with scimitars in my basic fantasy. They're cursed blades, but there you go. And then we've got the adventure stuff, and again, this is absolutely packed with illustrations too. That a bit like the adventure books that you used to be able to do. They would pop up with little illustrations that would just give you a feel for what the individuals were like that you were coming across. This looks great. You really get a kind of feel for just the shambolic nature of maybe some of these dungeons, and just so how awful some of this is. That there's something out of Treasure Island, Skull Island. We're gonna have all that kind of stuff going on. So hopefully I've got your interest, your spider senses are pricked up your ears. And you are thinking, yes, a bit of old school, a bit of fun. And that's going to be the idea of this, is going to be try to have a bit of fun. not too serious, but serious enough that I'm not going to just be trite in it. A bit like my approach with my Homes Basic, where I take it seriously, even though it would be viewed as being a starter type role-playing game, but I'm treating it as a fully formed campaign. So I'm going to do the same with my Dragon Warriors. I'm going to treat that quite seriously, and but still have a bit of British humour in it, hopefully. And in the next episode, I'm going to generate the party of adventurers and select the primary character. So I'll probably have between 4, I think they recommend between 4 to 6 in your party that you should have. And I'll have, I'll probably have a random determination whether it's 4 or up to 6. And probably maybe just go for 5. And then one of them will be our kind of our first amongst equal, our primary interest, and we'll have a little morality matrix for them, and we'll be following that path as we go through the adventures. And I'll introduce this morality scale and the interplay of virtue and shadow as measurable trackers of the player's moral standing. So what I try to do in all my campaigns is bring in something different on the character side and the generation, and this is my attempt in Dragon Warriors, is to have this morality, and this will embody a lot of things to do with your personality. So this will say basically how moral you are, how good you are, how honourable you are, whether you are quite despicable or are you really quite virtuous. And I think that's the way that this is the kind of almost the dichotomy that is looked at in this game world. It's on those two scales. And then I'll do a brief run through of the rule system and then actually launch straight into the first adventure in book 1. And that's called The King Under the Forest. And that appears at the end of this. If you could just look at the, this shows you with the contents, it really is quite comprehensive. So we've got the explanation what a fantasy role-playing game is, creating the character, the rules of combat, some of these things, hit roll, armor bypass roll, weapons, wounds and recovery, this really is quite comprehensive. Going berserk, that's good. And then we've got all these other things about evasion and defense, increasing in rank, adventuring rules, things like with lights and all that good stuff. And travel, outdoor travel, tips on games mastering and how to do that. And then playing the game. And then we've got at the end of chapter 9, we've got the scenario, The King Under the Forest. And that is what we are going to indulge in at the end. And imagine our little party of adventurers, our kind of proto individuals sitting around the table, and will suddenly appear to be reformed as bold knights and barbarians, maybe a sprinkling of sorcerers and mystics as well. And who knows, we might even have an elf or a dwarf. But we're not going to have any halflings in this because they are actually actively discouraged as being adventurers in this. So I think we'll just stick with those 3 races. And it is a human-centric world, and it's quite dominated by the human side. So I don't even mind if my entire party is human. They're still going to have a lot of cultural richness by that. With the barbarian element, is going to be quite interesting to shoehorn that in. They're rare, but they are from these more exotic climes, and they're also quite not au fait with the feudal society that we're going to be in. So we could have quite a bit of interesting banter between the barbarian and the rest of the party. Okay, well, that is Dragon Warriors in a nutshell. Hopefully you are interested in sharing my exploits. As I've said, I had a lot of fun with this back in the day, exploring this kingdom of Airworn and Skull Island and all that kind of stuff. And I have forgotten it all but I just remember how much fun I had, and that is a lasting testimony after all these years. And then as soon as I saw these things in the garage, I thought, wow, yes. I think I'd mentioned them on an update that I had played these a lot, but I was so pleased to see them, and they've kind of just brought a little, not tear to the eye, but just a kind of pang of nostalgia. And I thought, right, that's what really drives this channel, is my nostalgia drive. I am going to be indulging that fix with these game books in another little mini campaign. And before you worry and you start fretting, you think, oh no, but what about AD&D? What about RuneQuest? What about, they're all still active. Everything is active. I'm just expanding the channel, and if I am creating quite a lot of content every week. I can see it. I may be focusing a lot on my new starts and the new kids on the block, but once I think I've already mentioned that if I get to around about 10 or 11 or even 12 videos on each of those, they don't go into hiatus, but they become part of the overall schedule, and they just go into a rotation, and like the rest of the campaigns. And at some point, you will get whatever you signed up for appearing as a video, which I will hopefully naturally appear as if I have just come from the previous video, and not a month has passed between the two. Okay, right, I think I have talked enough. I will go away and I will start creating for my next episode, so that we can see Dragon Warriors in action. So thank you very much for watching this one, and I hope you will come back and join the next one.